it seems fitting for an internationalist magazine to have an event on Zoom with people from far away joining us. And as I said earlier, I kind of like people to feel comfortable and at home. So it's fine if your pets wish to come interview, and we say hello to them as well. So the event format, I must introduce Joanna, my apologies. So Joanna is our technical host as ever. So Joanna, would you like to say a few words and say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. So as David says, I'm here to provide the tech support. If anybody has any needs or if anything's going wrong on their end for some reason, I'm here. You can ask me any questions in the chat. You'll have noticed that we're recording tonight. If for any reason you don't want to appear in that recording, we will be recording on speaker view, so you shouldn't appear in that recording. But to make sure that you're not, please turn off your cameras. And as David says, we want to make this event as friendly and informal as possible. So if you need to turn off your cameras at any point to just have a walk around or have a screen break, that's absolutely fine. And in terms of background noise, I'm here to manage some of that to make sure we're not interrupting the reading. So I might mute you if you've left your mic on, but we will be unmuting after the readings so we can give it the appropriate applause. I think that should be everything, but if you need anything, as I say, just pop something in the chat and I'm here.
Thank you so much. Also now I'd like to introduce Simon, who will be hosting the second half of the event. Welcome,
thanks,
Simon.
Yep, thanks, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, yeah. So you'll also be speaking on Ray Armantrout's poetry on Saturday at the festival. So yeah, the event format for tonight is the first half will be readings by Abigail and Vahni for 20 minutes. I'll introduce them and then there should be some time for some questions and answers afterwards. And then we'll have a 5-minute comfort break and then Simon will introduce Ray and Maurice. Yeah, so this is the first event of the 2021 festival entitled Digging Deeper Roots and Remains. And the theme evolved out of the workshops and events that we've had in the past year and references a range of possibilities and explorations, including hidden histories, archaeology, anthropology, etymology, ethnopoetics, ecology, and language work. So that's generally speaking the area that the festival is going to be engaged with. And this year, as ever, there'll be talks, readings, and discussions around this poetic field. And we'll be celebrating 2 poets in particular, Ray and Carol Watts. This is a tradition going back to 1995 when we celebrated David Gascoigne. I think the following year it was Irina Ratishinskaya, and then the last 2 years of the festival it's been Peter Larkin and Alan Fisher. So without further ado, I'm going to now introduce Abigail Chabitnoy. She, her, is the author of How to Dress a Fish from Wesleyan University Press, winner of the 2020 Colorado Book Award for Poetry and shortlisted in the international category of the 2020 Griffin Prize for Poetry. She was a 2016 Peripheral Poets Fellow, and her poems have appeared in Hayden's Ferry Press, Boston Review, Tin House, Gulf Coast, Lit Hub, and Red Ink. An interview with her by the Australian poet Mark Prendergast will appear in Tears in the Fence 75. She was the recipient of the Witter Biner funded Native Poet Residency at Elsewhere Studios in Colorado, and is a mentor for the Institute of American Indian Arts MFA in Creative Writing. She is a Koniag descendant and member of the Tanganak, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, native village in Kodiak. So without further ado, welcome Abigail.
Thank you, David. Chmai, hello, Koyana, Tunichanak. is the native village. But speaking of hidden histories, I grew up very distanced from my culture and my heritage. And so the first time I actually got to go to Kodiak and visit where my family is from, I was also wandering around the tribal offices, asking for the Tongarnock tribe as well, and took a few minutes of puzzled stares before someone realized what I was trying to say. So what a fitting theme for the festival to be here, and I'm really pleased to be here to be able to join you. Excited to hear the work of everyone else reading today. I think in keeping with that theme, I'm going to read one of the longer poems from my collection, How to Dress a Fish, which is very much concerned with this idea of hidden histories, silenced histories, subjective interpretations of those histories, and then read a little bit from what I hope will be my second book in light of kind of current events in the US, particularly going on in Texas right now, and thinking of how our histories perpetuate and continue to send ripples forward. So I'm some language work in there as well, and I'm sure there are always threads to be found if we look for them. So collection object, Pinarok, currently on view. When I decided to be Indian, they were everywhere. There are a lot of Indians in the lower 48. I am learning by my hand how big my hand is. How many homes on this street are still haunted? We were taken to learn how to cut trees, to live here, how to make clothes, to hide ourselves, how to bend steel and other metal with enough pressure and fire, how to yield to desired shapes, how at first we didn't know how to fire our arms, to fit our bodies to metal. At first, we didn't know how to leave here to survive, didn't know how to dig the bodies, how to recover the faces, the labres, the weight that was fastened to bones once the barracks were reoccupied, once the children were sent home. How, I am asking. We didn't need to teach them how to draw fish. They didn't need to teach us how to sew the skin. Don't ask me to identify them. I haven't decided which yet or whom. I never learned to sew or gut a fish. I didn't understand how to use the objects archaeologists uncovered. Where is my shovel? Iksak iphetuk, shilak iptuk, ningon kakeweme etuk. I am putting bait on my hook, or the records recovered from the archives. Press clipping 1910. Michael Chabitnoy, an Alaskan ex-student, is one of the many Carlisleers who is making good out in the world. He has been in the employment of the Hershey Candy Company for about 2 years and is now earning from $4 to $5.50 a day. A woman told me I was a witch, a Navajo word for witch or something approximate. I was wearing my thumb on the wrong ring, or I was wearing my Hopi ring on the wrong thumb, the stone having fallen out of the Peruvian ring I otherwise wore. I hadn't decided if it was real. But I am not Hopi or Navajo, so it was okay, I guess. Do they call them Indians in Peru? She asked me, this woman, why have you come here? She asked me, are you trying to relate to me something? Before we were Russian, they told us we were Russian. It means salmon fisher in Russian, doesn't it? One face is not enough to adapt. to survive, to be both predator and prey, and a shark is, after all, not so different. Blood and other body. After all, a little wood and paint and a century in the earth, and a man's face might assume a shark in an appropriate style. After ending the week in the margins of creative industry, editing others' errors with as little voice as I could muster, I took a field trip to Denver with the other women. We ate Indian tacos and fry bread in an Indian restaurant, and I thought, I am here with these women. I am. Together, we admired the t-shirts on the wall with their slogans. No reservations needed. It didn't look like a shark. It didn't look like it was buried for 100 years. Must it be old in order to be authentic? In order to be an authentic Amerindian artifact? The word has gone out of fashion. Nowadays, it is a heritage object. It still doesn't look like the shark I was expecting, and it takes me a while to find it in the sea of faces mounted on the wall. When I was a girl, my parents took us to the Four Corners to go sightseeing. Do you like Native American things? Then you must go to the Southwest. I was wearing my raven pendant, the one from the wrong village I bought at another museum, and a cheap circle charm with tribal etchings I had bought for $6 at a rock shop in Old Town. It said I would come to no harm in water, and I took it for a sign. I wore a dream catcher in my right ear and a feather in my left. It does no good to tell these people you were there. It matters to them that they can help you. Like the woman at another museum from Alaska, the one from Connecticut who had moved there and collected heritage objects indiscriminately. Have you been? Yes, oh, you must go. I went to Denver with the women because I needed new material. I needed a second hand. Namah lapaka. The fish hook is sharp. The awl is sharp. The needle is in the sewing bag. I'm putting bait on my hook. For a time, we were strictly rock people, the Pueblo girl said between bounces in the back seat of the passenger van. Out the window, all the houses on this street are haunted. What a shame, my mother said, that they've become encumbered by television. All these wires are spoiling the panorama. What a shame they are not living like Indians anymore. Poor Indians. In my memories, often my mother becomes a scapegoat. A daughter must be faultless in her presentation. Guard your tongue in youth, said the old chief, and in age you may mature a thought that will be of service to your people. My father bought us each a Kachina doll so they would be less poor, so we would have something to remember them by. We bought souvenirs from all the reservations. The careful beading on my medallion snapped before we'd made it home. Later, on that same trip in Albuquerque, I watched men play their flute music like it was magic while my parents wandered in and out of shops. I looked down into the square at their performance. The man was singing. He stared up at me on the balcony, and I stared back intently. I was too young to know there was something not quite right in that stare. It's a bear on my witch ring. You've heard, of course, of the great Kodiak bear, and Wood Island is just across a narrow channel we are from, according to the records. Of course, this connection has been retrofitted, a deliberate hole in a fine sheet of metal laid over a solid band, fired to fit. I guess we are Aleut after all. They told us we were Russian. I wouldn't have even known there was a shark if it wasn't for the placard on the wall. But labels too can be misleading. A vague field of grave-shaped holes, smooth under fresh white paint. Here lies. A girl, when I was careless with my dolls. I pulled out their feathers, I popped their wooden arms off. Now they lay prostrate on their backs, sick men in cubbies, where I show them. But I still don't know the names, and it only takes one small cloud in an otherwise blue sky across the sun to make me shiver, to raise the hairs on my arms. And I wonder, would I be able to survive in the islands north? I wonder, would I be able to keep my body warm there where lay my family bones? I saw a bear in Pennsylvania once. No one believed me. Used the mask, himerok, like a face. When we were through with the exhibits, we wandered through the gift shop. I was hoping to find a recreation of Warhol's commodified Indian to hang on my wall. There was only the usual jewelry and some baskets, woven horsehair. Someone knew the woman who made them, the cost staggering in ways only a history of genocide, of subjection, willed extinction, of defiance can justify. We would not pay so much for ordinary goods. Are these earrings authentic? Are they Native American made? Were they sustainably harvested? It matters where we break the line. I am painting my mask. Like travelers, the faces were painted red. I heard we were not Indians after all. I heard we were our own, not Indian, indigenous people. It's complicated. We call them naked ones. They, Makarngaskat, Kamani, Amratut. Mix the pigments with oil or blood to bind. Naked, we were unafraid, unencumbered. Encumbered, present arms to strike, paint ourselves targets. Strike here and here. Strike here where I have let my color show, where I have painted myself fatal with blood. I made a pair of earrings, ivory and turquoise plastic. They cannot be found for sale anywhere else in the world. I imagine the earrings I bought at the Heritage Center in Anchorage were made the same. A nail, some beads, a pair of pliers, and the right amount of history, of blood. Truthfully, I was disappointed when I learned it was so simple. When will I be old? There are a lot of naked ones in the lower 48. At a glance, they could be people under so much skin, or birds. 25 birds for 25 girls, for 1,200, for 4,000. A girl, a father, and a star don't have to look how they're supposed to. And after all, we are water people. Why not be sharks? Or a bear like those stars, or a short-eared owl, something that burrows despite itself, something that excavates. There is a storm about our ears. If you turn those stars upside down, they resemble nothing so much as a shovel. Oil or blood. One face is not enough surface to bear enough weight. How many would it take to stop a bullet? 26 September, 1745. Targets for practice were found in abundance. Thank the merchant from Okhotsk, Grigor Shelikov, the benevolent, the founder of Alaska. Under other management, advances were made in science. 1764, one Captain Soloviev was reported to experiment, among other things, upon the penetrative power of his bullets by binding 12 alutes in a row. Welcome, how, new world. You mix the blood with oil. The placard on the wall calls the tall wooden man, welcome figure, 1900. Welcome being a matter of perspective, requiring copper and arms. I am teeth and shell and skin. The shark doesn't look so different. How old must I be? These marks are not significant on land where we have lain. I heard through grave pines, it doesn't take a sky of stars to suggest an arrow, though I suppose a spear would be more appropriate, or a harpoon. It depends which way you look, how much fits at hand. A shovel? I think the masks on my wall are all wrong, from Hawaii, Africa, Costa Rica, from everywhere but home. I looked at the mask the placard told me would look like a shark, but all I saw was the green face of a man looking dead and not very old. In the summer, my skin tends red, but the sun lightens my hair and my eyes are already green, not brown, and old, getting old. I hide my inheritance behind my back, swinging pendulum, my inverse infant. My body is too conflicted from a front to fit in my hand. The time is at hand for motives. Motives must be held accounted. I am looking for the body hanging round my neck, pulling me forward to the place I can see honestly. Say, I am not an Indian, not an Indian. I can say here and present not arms, but hands outstretched for a mother, my mother. To any other, I can say, I am of the water. I can say that. I am. And then I'm actually just going to read, I think just one poem from this new collection. For my mother, and written while I was in Texas, as it were. This is titled Baptism by Fire, after the painting Baptism by Fire by John Patrick Cobb that was displayed at the Mexic Art Museum in Austin, Texas. In a painting in the tent, did they call it shrine? Did they call it temple? In the museum, in the part of Texas, everyone said was all right. Everyone said would be all right. I found a girl with my mother's name who brought fire down from the mountains. It would have been dark without it, don't you think? The sky, burdened with gold. But for that woman-sized break of blue she passed through. She carried this fire from the gods, or the heavens, or the mountains, in her dress, in the earth, on the ground, at her feet. That is, out of her hands, it would have cast the setting in shadows. Sometimes you have to rip a hole in the sky. Sometimes you have to tear a seam into the fabric. This is my beloved mother. No one told to put the fire down. This is my beloved mother. No one cast her glow into shadow and shame. This is my beloved mother with fire in her dress. See, she prepares to ignite the fire with her magic. Joanna, thank you all so much for being here, and can't wait to hear the others.
Oh, David, I think you need to unmute yourself.
So thank you very much, Abigail. That was a wonderful reading. Thank you for starting our festival and exploring those themes I mentioned early on so well. And so now I'd like to introduce Vahni Capildeo, they, them. FRSL is a Trinidadian Scottish writer of poetry and non-fiction. The most recent of their 8 books and 8 pamphlets are Like a Tree Walking, which is due from Carcanet, and the Oyster Catcher pamphlet, The Dusty Angel. Their interests include silence, plurilingualism, traditional masquerade, which stems from their upbringing in Port of Spain, and multidisciplinary collaboration. They are writer in residence and professor at the University of York, a visiting scholar at Pembroke College, Cambridge, and an honorary student of Christ Church, Oxford. They've received numerous awards and poetry fellowships. It's always fun to engage with Vahni, so welcome. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be here, and as I keep telling people, I have amazing memories of Chairs on the Fence from years back when I was a very small poet and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm now a slightly wider poet in a few senses and don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to read. There should be content warnings for lots of things in my poems, but I can't remember what, but basically a great many dreadful things happen at some point. Also, I'm going to screen share, which will improve, I hope, accessibility for some of you. And for those of you who rightly want to look at the text rather than my face, if you hover, there'll be a vertical line and you'll be able to give more room to the text. If there's anybody who wants to do the opposite, please don't let on that you're doing that. So what I'm going to read will be a mix of very new work, and some of it will be from Like a Tree Walking. And I was also very ill with non-COVID illnesses over the last year, and then I started writing little fragmented poems, thanks to Jack Belloli, the eco-poet and thinker who unfortunately isn't here tonight, I think. And so some of those poems for Jack are also mixed in. Violent triage. Poets, you spoke like stones in water, going against the grain, wearying and refreshing, what you gain in true reflections reflected in lost income. That was then, and since then what we learnt is truth must feel hard and must be a process. Violent triage. When did it start? Have you applied your skills to that? Or are you still above origins? Violent triage. Between the violet and varied green. Did it slip past your guard, flashing fake ID, modelled after pleasure pain? Check in with me, check up on me, interrogate me like nobody interrogated me, caress me in an agreed fashion. Transfer the Christmas list to an Excel sheet. Excavate this for me. Violent triage. Did it start with a game? Seed head fluff, blow that, love, friendship, hate, marry, adore. Cross out the letters of your classmates' names to get results. Is a BuzzFeed quiz the acute phase of, the soft face of? Violent triage. Congratulations! Your color is indigo. Check out your soulmates who are indigo too. When did you aspire to be spiritual, but not religious? Before or after supersized duty-free 3-for-2 chocolate bars relaxed you and revved you up for online dating, the mysterious appeal of stranger danger. Big data is just the boy next door. When were you complicated in public? Before or after you began withholding coins from beggars who had that look or that look? Who is the heroine in this case? Violent triage. Help them by not helping. And are you a soft summer or a bright spring? I was writing a poem with dogs running, and I wanted to distinguish them, the curled one, the deep-chested, the ridge-runner, a poem with dogs running after their master, a hunter who turned into a deer. But I couldn't finish. Violent triage. Have you ever recanted a poem? This puts you in the percentage of people who... The doorbell was ringing. The downstairs American Oxford neighbours wanted to check by chatting on the intercom if I was doing terrorism. I was doing transcriptions. Have you any idea whether those are citizens beside you on the bus? She wasn't even baptized, but she declared for Catholic. Which saint then? It just kills me. Poets, do you live near water? Or how many footsteps away? And how many footsteps in a day do you take towards water? It is advisable, but not enforceable, to throw stones. This will raise the volume, unless you are in the situation of which child for school, which for the cotton harvest. Testing times. But do you think we could ever be like that? Violent triage. Do you have SMART goals? Scared, measurable, achievable, reproductive, televisual. Violent triage. Whether in pastel, rose gold, or electric blue, is viral in our minds, crowning that other virus. Natural to ask, who's dead? Who's as good as? Violent triage. Plan accordingly. Did Google translate you as disponible or disposable? Cross yourself when you pass a burial ground. What about when you see a smartphone? But you were indigo. You can't be expected to see cobalt. Did Google translate you as available or valuable? Bow your head when you pass a cemetery, but you have Venus and Aquarius and are more likely to keep it cool. Let me do your chart. Let me pull a card. Violent triage. Dream of a tidy resurrection. Because the angels can't be left-wing. From rows of graves will pop like municipal tulips. Don't imagine they'll rise up then, citizens of everywhere. The vast unmarked. In what eschatology does death lead to decolonization? The sea will push up too many timbered heads. Violent triage. Stories of how it all ends. What is the critical faculty? What kind of sickness? We all suffer from something. Violent triage. A new poetics. Silence of the heart. This Dante poem was commissioned by a recent work press in Australia. I should say more specifically in Canberra. Inferno. One size fits most. Mr. Alighieri, I'm curious. Who cleaned your shoes when you got back from hell? What brand are they, and how hard are your soles? You stampeded through the bitter wormwood. At least a twig, if not a yellow flower, must have stuck. You were super unsure about your footing. That's why you give us instructions how to steady our feet. I wonder. Sometimes on your way you fell asleep. I understand you slept in hell. I've almost done that. With your drastic drop and pass out, you're like someone taking cover from natural catastrophes. Drop and hold on. The good interpreters come pigeoning. They nod. That sleep's a trance. That one's a rapture. This time he's in celestial ecstasy. No, even in hell you were being repaired. Did a blue-silver angel bend lower than earthward, feathering footwear smooth and clean for you? Did the temperature changes help with the dirt? Steam treatment in the adulterer's swirl, an ice rinse later? Anyway, you stepped up. Saw the stars again. You're saved, so you don't have a ghost. That sigh at my shopping mall anxiety is Virgil's shade, perhaps, kit list in hand, summed up in one word. Follow. You swapped out that list for one word. Love. I want to know, Mr. Alighieri, who cleaned your shoes, and which nameless guest forgot his jacket in my pinewood wardrobe. Many people stayed while I was away. I'm wearing it. Scarlet leaves are crawling from my pockets. Migraine improv. As big as you can, as small as you can, make it the same thing. Seagull on the roof, common snipe in the yard, 24/7 bird sound, wet feather, white flutter, flood water, volcano blackout, volcano privilege, volcano print, distant volcano, extinct volcano, volcano voile, paper recycling, fly away Peter, fly away Paul, suffer, sulfur, souffle, snowflakes, syringes, bananas, oranges, statisticians, foragers, mask, no mask, nose, mask, mask, ventilator, ventilation, dense lesbian trees, marriage, parasol, geraniums, abandoned lighthouse, dense lesbian trees, people fall on their faces, things are looking up, dense lesbian trees, sweet singing in the choir, sweet singing in the choir. I should explain that I found myself in a dark wood in a dream, with an actual dream, and an invisible guide helpfully explained to me that some of the trees, though not all of them, were dense lesbian trees. I thought it was too good to lose that, so it became a refrain. This next poem is from a Valley Press anthology commission, and I should be better organized. It's this one, which is being launched from the excellent Valley Press in Yorkshire, with lots of much better poets than me. And the lighthouse is in North Edinburgh. Scales of loss and longing. I walked to the lighthouse with you, all of you who were absent, and I said, the face of the moon soon would be ploughed up. And you said, conscious of the Queen of Heaven, the moon doesn't have a face. And I said to you presently, the moon would be furrowed in a way you could see from Earth. And then we looked, half absently, at the ruby cloud in gathering, and the tactless moon encroached upon us, endeared itself to us, displaced in time from us, exploitable in names like ours. And I said, exactly because you aren't here, walking past the old chained pier, which is shut. And are you hurrying into a sleepy pleat? I said, when I can't see, I hear the lift in your voice. When I can't hear, I feel the lift in your form. When I can't feel, I sense the lift in your heart. I say it walking with you when you, absent, perhaps not walking, reply. The face, the lighthouse, some harmony, the moon. Moving through the different senses there was partly an exercise, but partly inspired by the way that disabled poets have been bringing to our attention during the recent age of Zoom, that closed captions, live sign language, cameras off, and available text are neither interchangeable nor replaceable, but are really necessary in getting away from one of the last remaining isms. Quite a few people I knew or knew of have also died by their own hand this year. Dream of. The pale horse entered houses, wanting to be watered, fed, not staying where you led it, and when you found it again, cornered you in the kitchen up against the sink and bit you. The pale horse from that book. Dust and proud of it. Death is no secret thing, does not come visiting, already in the room, makes us at home. Death's pronoun is not it. Oats neither spilt nor split, corner the purpling mouth. Spider for moth. Some take hands, some turn backs, or purify or tax. Relationships they hold. While uncontrolled, death will not organize, placard or canonize, or more than seem to choose. Doors we can't close. While I'm scrolling down, please feel free to adjust your position or get some water or whatever else you might be drinking. Very boring these days, I'm a water person. Purple. Miss you from wherever you've gone. And you make a habit of going as if departure were texture, wool, rope, oil, water. And you, an haute couture collagist, had to try them all, an embarrassment of amethysts, a rental of incandescence, a portcullis of contracts, a tall ship of suggestibility, an unconsciousness of exclusion, an inclusion of unconsciousness, an editorial of thunder and lightning, a staple of staples, a small word in the air. I'd like to greet at that point Rachel Allen, who is in the audience and has suffered some of the same bereavements. Coition banquet. I say, don't forage mushrooms at all. The dark woods, they say, are uncool, but thank you, and we refuse to know pure mourning is happening. Ideologically, pure mourning, a mushroom ring, righteous trespass, docks, crocs and sandals up some field. You don't look like you feel. And am I that name? Is it grass or glass? Eat what? They show me rag idolatry, a lying grasp at nettles, mindful fracturation, cards, another. Show me the way. This one's a prayer. I think that's a content warning. Never have I ever. I've been bending the air of God for years, sure and impermanent as rust water saddens the dyes pressed from buddleia leaves and grass on rags nobody thought to hem before cutting. And now I do think of it. Won't do it, though. When you tell me to stop praying for you, you're saying stop something I can't help. All neighborhoods need a utility queer, but I never was a dab hand with a toolbox. I'll kick any bucket. Take away my prayer, make me the neighborhood futility queer. Teach me how to swear to the end of the breakwater in Polish and all the way back in Greek. I'll tell you the one about the bear I heard in Ireland. Bonfires on the beach, secondary smoke, marijuana, herb of wisdom, clinging to the cliff-top cyclist. You've never done illegal drugs? Too many killings. Hear my prayer. Quite a lot of people in that poem. One of my main faults is to have a poem which, is of the length to fit only the personal pronoun I, and actually it's got as many people as it can not fit. In this case, they were from Leith Community Croft in North Edinburgh's famously undesirable, desirable area. Desirable, undesirable area. Imaginary gardens. Pirate Iseult, gentlest of creatures, transfigured, backlit to your zoomy perseverance, I bring the usual gifts, some of my best. War, after silence, labyrinth for the allotment, peppermint in the hot stone, bonksies at the sea's edge, shriek in the orchard, hogs with intact ears and tails, a pail of corpse fish, a pail of compost sugar, a good knockdown argument at the altar rail. Your church is covered with ramblers, roses, mushrooming rucksacks unchecked, bringing gifts of subtraction. Long have I waited. I am 10 times the man of any man or woman of you, without having to do anything about it. When we are far away, far enough, one of us becomes the world, the other discoverable. Are you okay with the spaces in this? Will they be able to download the downloadable? Is the program too hungry, too slow? One of the things I learned when I was working for the Commonwealth Foundation in terms of arts outreach was the importance of having things available online which used very simple frames and could be downloaded via dial-up connection or on a not very smart smartphone, which is just another of the things to bear in mind when we're thinking of our global interconnectedness. The lack of internet, terrible word, penetration in most areas. Obviously not the ones from which we're logged in. I think I'll read 2 more poems because this is quite heavy going. Or I could read 2 short ones or 1 long one. What do you think? David? Did you say 2 short ones?
I said 1 long one, please.
Okay, it's quite long. And it's got content warnings for everything. It's also got a real person in it, maybe 2. It's totally libelous. After an unspeaking, this is the circus for dead horses only. We are in a tent, but there's no outside, no breathable outside. There is mud and stars, but no ticket seller, and no in-between atmosphere. Somebody uncertainly approaching certainly could not stand up. The mud would suck him down, the stars would suck her up. This is the circus of exclusions, not approximations. The dead horses canter at a soft pace, satin around their hooves. The dead horses jump from buckets, landing softly over the sawdust. This is the trick of assertions without any ground. No overlap with anywhere. Your city exists and is unaffected by the circus. Don't be mean about the ribbons. If they mean nothing to you, they should mean nothing to you. What if the ribbons are in this temporary atmosphere, in the only atmosphere, the symbol of grace? But I am breathing sawdust, and I cannot see sawdust, and my pockets are full of receipts, but twigs are clinging to my clothes, and the tent pole is not a tree. Leaves are on my shoulders like expired tickets, and I am fond of horses. Even these ones, grinning without stopping. How did you get here? You did very well to get in. We have to muffle their hooves. They might have to cross a frozen river. Hooves muffled as if with Eastern basket work. Yes, Eastern. Enclosed horses, far distant horses. I was in an airport and a man said it was all about him. He was the colour of a number of ladies' perfume boxes, duty-free, rosy with broken veins. He was lyrical. It was only him and the girl behind the counter. His instant love went into a box and into another box and into, would you guess it? A 3rd box. But by the final couplet, he was alone again. His solitude took up all the lounging space in the airport, paid and free, and none of the security cameras. Only the girl's insecurity non-cameras occupied themselves with him throughout the numerous terminals. Ignorable special gift displays, his timeless well-stacked gift replay. And one thing I can surely tell you, this is what romance looks like, and you had better review it in print. For throughout the numerous terminals, he was innumerably unpolitical. He was a poet and worked as a poet, and this is how poetry works. The girl answered him blushingly, perplexed in all the right ways. I don't have her training. I don't know what she said. I don't take your word for her lines, or that I no longer resemble my passport photograph. Potentially unpoetic. Actually a serious problem. By now he's in a magazine as well as being in a faster queue, purling along without price, almost but not quite beyond purchase. Would you ransom him perfect bound? Does she have his digits? You'd be right to call me bitter, but I don't care. Female security guard is feeling up my tights. Electric blue and black stripes, my foot on a stool like a little bucket. So long as there's a cafe on the other side, I don't care. My ID is uncertain, but like a certain kind of poet, I want caffeine. Nothing has killed my want of caffeine. Bring me a horse as well. Why not? I am ancestrally out for stars. What was wonderful was to find war could involve neither death nor waiting, because everyone was long dead and in translation. Still, I dare not inform the prophetess that she is no more, a series of epithets, no more than a series of epithets. With her burning hair, She eats time like air and never looked forward to being in a poem, so long dead, so often in translation as not to be political. I suppose she did look forward to being history, which is not the same, cantering at a soft pace, which is not the same, reaching down for the stars in a sky-facing bucket tented over, void filled to the rim. I wanted at least a blanket to give her in this cold and quilted circus, but she was already holding out the purple veil she's kept for spare, and I had given away my sword, a real-life event best left without record. For so long its curvature had been my security that now I hold to other things, and couldn't prove what was gone, having no proof in my possession, no proof of that bird-held hilt and sharp curve was ever in my possession. It was the wrong kind of sword. The trick of disappearing was neither hers nor mine. Only words, for to point out what isn't there in a gently textiled circus is political, if ever under review. A good review, at minimum 3 days' work. How beautiful without pay. This is why please do not mention the ocean except as blue-green, whale road, swan road, path of exile only for Domesday booked living bone. Excise such crossing times as might be political. You must see it without the wrong ships in mind, because the ocean in a poem must not become political, and further blue-purple. It is unfortunate your friend's book was political before it was born, because of where he was born. Some places are political. Also his body thunders politics, let it remain dark in text. Some bodies are political from their conception, let them not imaginatively conceive. Though you know nobody brighter in love in the campus in the city, across the sea, and across the desert. No prizes for loving. We feel his love launched as if the political were personal. But haven't your missiles already landed? How is your personal not political? Free and spacious, fine and small, your poetry has the biggest free trade deal the world has ever known, unilateral and non-reciprocal. I am tuned in and hearing you musically, the while you refuse to know. When Fay Weldon's team came up with the slogan, "Go to work on an egg," did the Holy Spirit move them? When some underling did the drapery for the luxury photograph and leftover children at the hairdresser glimpsed infinity in the purple waves, who dare say the Holy Spirit did not move them? Why are you bringing the Holy Spirit into this? I didn't. And if you did, I didn't understand you. I understand you didn't mean me to do this after you didn't dare bring... As most people reading wouldn't believe, far less advertise the Holy Spirit, like Dwayne Dove's fine-flavoured chocolate or a bar of Dove soap, and the sign painter who ought to have died but persists in embarrassing and luckily undocumented environments, shakes involuntarily in every part of his body except his brush hand, and the typographer who is much too young and persists in collecting the sign painter's art for never to be commercialized fonts, is too close to the edge of the forest and never too far into the city to be a true artist. This is not true art. Make no mistake. True art is otherwise, and on the curriculum and not without citation. It has a studio without needing a studio, nor dreams of demanding a studio. And the curriculum from which this poet learnt is cancelled by time passing, and now not without citation. Don't touch me. This is no kind of office. Even if I walk to the lighthouse, I only walk to the lighthouse. You have a card that opens the way to the river. The way to the river is closed. I don't have a card. Some movements are truer and more cooperative than others. Just look how I've lost form. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would anyone like to ask a question in chat to either Abigail or Vahni? Let's see what I've got there. I agree with Peter. It's been wonderful to be able to follow the text on the screen as you read it, Vahni. It's quite a very full reading you gave us there. I think people are generally absorbing and considering it. Thank you very much, Abigail, as well. Such a wonderful set of poems.
Could I just hop in and say how much I really loved Abigail's reading, and particularly, Abigail, all the things you're saying about ritual and heritage objects. That there were things that have sometimes passed through my mind, but never with such amplitude or clarity or anger or desolation. It was wonderful to hear you voice that.
Oh, thank you so much, Vahni. I'm still kind of just floored from hearing your reading, and just the richness in the language was just beautiful. And yes, I think harrowing was a word someone brought up in the chat, but in such lovely and powerful ways.
I think for me, and beyond cliche, I think both of you have really shown us an authentic voice. I really loved both aspects of that, coming from a real heart of the lived experience for both of you. Actually, I think it's a fantastic start to this festival, and I love the work. And I can't say any more because I just want it to settle with me, because it's been such a wonderful start. So thank you.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, what we'll do is, I don't want to force it, we'll just have a 5-minute comfort break, I think. That seems to be, and then if we subsequently think of questions that we might raise later on, I'm quite happy with that. But for now, let's have a 5-minute break, I think, and people can replenish their drinks of water and so forth, and we'll come back in 5 minutes' time. So enjoy and see you a bit later. And I'm going to hand over to Simon now, and hopefully everyone's replenished and ready for the second half. Welcome, Simon.
Great. Thanks, David. Well, it was an incredible first half. I think I felt so kind of moved by the poetry that it felt like asking a question would have been just to somehow dissipate that energy and emotion that was conveyed by the two readers. I'm just really kind of stunned by it. So thank you to both readers. The second section we have two more great poets, Ray Armantrout and Maurice Scully, who I'm going to introduce in turn, and they will then both read again for around 20 minutes, and perhaps we'll have some questions at the end of this, unless people are equally stunned as they were at the end of the first half. So let me just close the door. So Ray is one of the founder members of the West Coast group of language poets in the US. She was born in Vallejo in California. She earned a BA at the University of California of Berkeley, where she studied with Denise Levertov, and she then went on to do an MA in San Francisco State University. Her collection Versed, which came out in 2009, won a 2009 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2010 Pulitzer Prize in Poetry. Her most recent collection is Conjure, which came out in 2020. She has another collection out next year, again from Wesleyan, her publisher. Ray's work pays meticulous attention to surplus or unintended meaning in language, juxtaposing material from disparate sources and posing unsettling questions. In a 2019 interview published in Rumpus, she said, "I like to play with the multiplicity and instability of meaning, partly out of a sense of adventure to see where that takes me, and partly in a whistling past the graveyard kind of way, because, of course, sensing stable meaning fall away can be scary. I've recently had the privilege of doing a short interview with Ray, which has been published in the Fortnightly Review. I've put in the chat a link to that in case anybody is interested. We were particularly talking about the environmental crisis and Ray's response to that in recent collections. It gives me enormous pleasure to welcome Ray to read to us. So over to you, Ray.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this festival. That was an amazing reading, the first half. Wow. And so now I am interested in reading more, of course, of the work of Vahni and Abigail. Okay, I'm going to start with one poem from Wobble. It's called Audience, and I'll give more introduction to this poem than I will to most of mine, but I wrote this after seeing a bad movie starring Russell Crowe. It was called Noah, and I can't really remember why I went to that movie, but perhaps I was interested in just seeing what a narrative about a flooded world would be like now, and if this audience would just be an audience of fundamentalist Christians, or if there'd be some other kind of audience for it. And then the second part of it is, which seems rather unrelated, was taken as technical language taken from an engineering magazine about fracking. So with that said, audience, phlegmatic and unbending, Russell Crowe as Noah teaches us to hold the door against the desperate and the many, threatened by catastrophic climate change, worse than we guessed and more immediate. Are we stowaways? Zipper fracture involves simultaneous stimulation of parallel horizontal wells. Viscoelastic surfactant gel has not been adequately described. Then I'll read 4 from my newest book, Conjure, and then I'll read some new work. Speculative fiction. The idea that producing a string of nonsense syllables while pointing toward an object may cause that object to change is common in children on the verge of language. The idea that force exists only as an interaction between objects, while an object is a kind of kink in a force field. The idea that if one survives X number of years, one will live to see how things turn out, or even that things end well. In the future, we will face new problems. How will we represent the variety of human types once all the large animals are gone? As sly as a mother? As hungry as an orphan? Notice. The way a gesture used to ward off trouble became cheerful waving. There was so much looming and vanishing to take note of always. We felt like play actors before we knew what we were about, and after. Turns out the mummy's curse is real. You pump thick death out of the ground and burn it, it kills you. But in all the movies, curses are a cheap plot trick. The doofus who can't read the hieroglyph dies first, and no one misses him, them. We were born yesterday. We're sorry. Even. First, they thought they could get things straight. Then they thought they could get even. They invented numbers to find out if the harm they'd suffered equaled the harm they'd caused. It didn't. Then they cast blame into bars and carried it forward. They were forward looking. We are. Numbers tick upward on a board above our heads. We've lost track of what they measure, but it's something bad. And this is called petard, which, as most of you will know, is a sort of Shakespeare Renaissance word for a small bomb or explosion. Petard. We hope to see things as they are, by which we meant without us. We thought once we stripped away smell, taste, color, anything improper, leaving only location and number, the thing would be naked on the teeter-totter of an equation. Then Archimedes told another one. If I had a long enough lever and a fulcrum, I'd get a high resolution image of objectified bodies and hoist myself on my own petard. And now I'm going to read some poems from my forthcoming book, finalists, or the finalists, haven't quite decided. This first poem is really two poems called The Light, and the second one is a bit of a revision of the first. And really, I wrote this last November while looking at the leaves that are right now outside this window, but they were different colors then. Crescendo. The light, 1, 3 o'clock, about 2 hours of light left, glorious on the ornamental pear, some leaves grizzled dark red, the large leaves of what we think is mock orange, yellow again, as when they first appeared, and will soon fall. I'll miss you so much when you're gone. I'd miss you if I looked away, or if a cloud covered the sun. I miss this moment as it goes on happening. The light, 2. That little tree, leaves now grizzled gold and dark red, is past all transaction, stiff in crescendo, praising no one. The gold my people raised the world for, cashed out there. Too much information. Dears, the backwards facing S, a decoration in the iron rail, was here when I came, with its extra curlicues at each end and a miniature version of itself like a fetus affixed to its middle. I'm telling you more, perhaps, than you need to know. The sun on the rail's inner curves is a private matter, something like love, despite the roar of the nearby freeway. I mix love up with safety. It's hard to come by good ideas while California goes up in flames. It's hard to have a new idea when temps in LA rival those in Iran. I can't say anything more original than gender reveal party sparks massive wildfire in tinder dry forest. You never know what will matter next. Pack everything. On growth. Dressed all in plastic, which means oil, we're bright-eyed, scrambling for the colored cubes spilled on the rug's polymer. Inside each is a tiny car. When we can't unscrew the tops, we cry for help. We're optimists. To sleep is to fall into belief. Airing even our worst suspicions may be pleasurable. We are carried, buoyed. In sleep, the body can heal itself, grow larger. Creatures that never wake can sprout a whole new limb, a tail. This may be wrong. Riddance. Okay, we've rendered the rendition. How often? What were we trying to get rid of? We exposed the homeless character of desire to the weather. Shall we talk about the weather? Worsening 4 times faster than expected, 8 times, until the joy of pattern recognition kicks in, until the crest of the next ridge is what remains of division. The news. There goes a truck. The news. We wanted to tell someone everything, or everyone something. How large and limp the leaves were in the half sun. But what is half sun, finally? We'd been relaxing protections in our sleep again, it seemed. Now we were fewer. Some imagined St. Peter as a special concierge or a supercomputer listening. Did he listen to what he must already know? Hearing only ones and zeros, pluses and minuses. Was that at least something? Over and over, first one tall stalk and then its twin dips westward and recovers. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. The end. Aspirational love flickered between them at the end. The end. Some might say it was conventional love, but it was aspirational too. It got in all the newspapers. Don't be a cynic. Want to hear a different story? All the insect helpers were gone in an instant. The worms that made the beds, the moths that worked on Cinderella's dress. Where are you? Intoned the baby girl, holding both palms up in the gesture we use to make light of our ignorance. What an excellent mimic. Finalist. Nothing to see here. Pine cones litter the gutters. Whose turn is it to blow on the mirror, Mama? Each pushes forward in her wild eagerness to take part in a ritual. Is this that thing about fireflies? Maybe. We use similes to show things are connected, and they are, just not in the ways we say. A hole in fresh dirt surrounded by orange cones into which a crow peers, hops sideways, then peers again. These wildlife finalists will take your breath away. That's something I really saw on the internet, that last phrase. I cannot imagine what it could refer to. Lions. Lion taming exists to make us think that the ferocity of lions is fake. Or lion taming exists to parody our sense of human mastery over the earth. Of course, any thought is a shot in the dark, but a poem exists to contain it. Now a thought is a watched pot. And then I'm going to read just a handful of even newer poems from a manuscript I'm working on now. Here I go. Here I go again was a rock anthem once, crowds on their feet, mouthing the words. There's no way to explain how faultlessly I want to write about how pointless all this is. Nothing I can point to but the gesture itself, the way it comes to seem anachronistic, spectral, like this ongoing attempt to catalog the world by latching each thing to the last memory it calls up. Nothing recalls the new Cat 6 haboob. But I'm hard to discourage. When a branch lays out 5 like an old card trick, identical white orchids, 3-petaled light sails spread, ready to go, each with a small bat face in the middle. I should have said before, in case you don't know, that a haboob is a real thing. It's an Arab word. It's a huge sandstorm, but now they're happening in Arizona. So it's when I lived in San Diego, they were on the news a lot. Freeze tag. In spring, when the firethorn pimples with hard buds. In summer, when the rose drops its rosy discards. In fall, when the trees go up in flames. In winter, when the kitsch fantasies of shelter go on sale. In spring, when full of toxins, we're interred in today's clothes. Reconnaissance. Where the sky is smoky, light is sallow, as it is in northern winter. It blanches the floor, antiques. Where it shines on metal, it's so dull, you can look at it directly, without flinching, as if it weren't real. Retinal activity in the dreaming fetus resembles that seen in an animal moving forward, perhaps through a long tunnel, barely conjectural, dark divided by a face. Oops, got 2 pages. Enchanted Forest. The time came when the flags flown over Enchanted Forest and Camperland could never be raised above half-mast because mass murder followed mass murder so rapidly. How is it that one bar of music can follow another longingly and languidly in this adagio often played at funerals? Scooting 2 chairs forward, you played traffic jam and beat. The thrill of pretending is not in pretending that you have improved things. Which kind of irony is this? Enchanted Forest is a pasteboard theme park carved out of the forest. Okay, 3 more. Seeing reason. She might have to retire her banshee voice, her campy, scary voice, her know-it-all, don't you believe it voice. She would miss it. It had taken her this far, plus people seemed to like it. When you heard that voice, you couldn't tell which side of it you were on, the sender or the receiver, the know-it-all or the well-known, which meant you got to choose. Was that why she'd adopted it? Or was it as a way to scold and warn without being too off-putting? Whatever, it was time to let it go. What was the point of warnings when desiccation, inundation, plague, extinction, and the murder of children were on constant display? No one needed to be told that they had no idea when the next bridge would fall. And pretending to speak for the disasters now arriving all at once was madness. But she had switched into the third person, past tense, slipped into a time when what mattered was to see reason. I don't know if this one really works or not, but I'm giving it a try. It has the most dramatic title ever. Gulf Stream Collapses. The poem pretends that things, bad in themselves, will resonate with one another, strike a chord, the long period. In dreams, the parents I loved and hated are back, weak and confused, and I dread having to care for them. By day, I'm the one stumbling, wondering who, if sooner than expected. And lastly, fire. Even the warm cement sidewalks where I played jacks in my memory made of this. Backfire, burnout, zombie fire, past, present, future, tense. We are a princess, they sing, one pushing the laundry basket, the other inside it, still waving. Okay, that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Ray. That was great. I love that image of the pasteboard enchanted forest carved out of the forest, and many other images that rose in those poems. So thank you very much. So next, Maurice Scully. Maurice was born in Dublin in 1952, and he spent his childhood between Clare, the Ring Gaeltacht, and Dublin. He was educated at Trinity College, and he is an experimental poet who, for many decades, has been working in a tradition very different from that of the Irish literary mainstream. He's been an editor of a number of influential magazines, Icarus and The Bow, and through the 1970s and the 1980s, he organised important readings and literary events. After many years living in Italy, Africa, and the west of Ireland, he settled in Dublin with his wife and 4 children and taught for a while at Dublin City University. For 25 years, Maurice devoted his time almost singly to a vast project which collectively is known as Things That Happen. This was published last year by Shearsman, the first time the whole thing has appeared within single covers. It's been published in sections over the years. So when I finished reading this a couple of weeks ago, very much a book I recommend people reading. Paul Perry describes Maurice's poetry as less about subject matter or what the poem is about, and more an occasion or experience in itself. It is a poetry that is playful, irreverent, skittish, rhapsodic, and paratactic all at the same time. I think this is a characterization that describes the work very well. I'd probably also add humor in there, as I think you'll probably hear when Maurice reads. So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Maurice Scully and invite him to read to us.
Thank you, Simon. Hello, am I audible? Yes, okay, you can hear me.
Yes, you are, yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Oh, thanks a million, Simon. Thank you for that. 3 terrific readings from Abigail, Vahni, and Ray. Wow, great evening. Okay, I'm going to read from a fairly recent book, playbook, published by Coracle Press, Erica Van Horns and Simon Cutts Press, lovely press. My modus is, my unit of composition is the book rather than the poem. In fact, I don't even, particularly in my case, like the word poem, and I use a compromise piece, a piece. So each piece in this book, playbook, has a title, and each title in the spirit of play begins with the letter P. Play also in the sense of strategy as well as game, and so on. A dog weaves through this book, and its barking is recorded in words like dark, park, arc, heart, and so on. Not really sure what the dog is saying, but it's pretty urgent. Path. A dog came up the steps with a tennis ball in its mouth to shake itself dry. On my way back from the disused lighthouse at the head of the pier, I notice now he's still there and alone and nosing the ball in quick, crafty shifts towards the edge, then grabbing it back in its mouth several times just in time until he lets the ball quite deliberately slip over and fall down again into the water. Again, the future, consilience. And so our dog is in the water again after the ball. Now, good dog. I should have said, too, that this book was being written in the run-up to 2016, our centenary of our 1916 revolution. And that year, of course, brought into even sharper focus the lurid distortions of our national story. So in this piece, Placed, I mix a national poet, Patrick Kavanagh, one of his famous so-called canal bank sonnets, with the game of Tiddlywinks. Some of the heroes of nationalism are warped into this, as well as, say, Plastics Pierced, echoing Patrick Pearse, the leader of that particular failed revolution. The epigraph is Where Motley, etc., from Yeats's great Easter 1916 poem. Plastic disc laughs into its cup, the plastic flat primary color of it. The green disc blinks into its cup. Don't let the cup tumble. Dice tickle the board, flick. Slim textures in circles, squares, diamonds, cylinders. I heard you rang, you answered, you parked in the park. You too parked next to the park. Roof, 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 roof. Disc by disc, the cups open, up laugh, down to your turn where slap, here's the cup, circle, square. Facts split the picture open. Rice grains dimple the ridges. Mirrors shimmer into out there, Howie, bang, bang. But that was the past, the sea of the past, the fog of the past, a forest of following, hollowing futures, bobbing whens, plastics pierced. O co-memor or emco morat may by water vat or emerald grass, brush past, trapped stick, red splash. Spread low with many mythologies, rippling a language's underparts, tapping your fingers quietly to another rhythm. Watch them now focusing what's to be said and how. Pool. The emperor of ice cream bangs with his bag full of God, dancing in the moonlight. You might as well live. I too dislike it. Shimmering fangs, a blur slipping over water in twilight, become a swan. Marks, dabs, misunderstandings. That tall stillness a heron. So far, so good. Among golden daffodils, a rupee wood, a solitary reaper, a guy with a guitar, my tippet only tow. Now that I look, now that the hunt is on, kin, cash, peace, a shiver in the grass where breezes passed and speckled possibility dipped a wing. Dark money, dancing on leaves, landing on, tilting, turning, the last, the least, the pages, dust rising to, but to dark money, to get to, down, this must, that persistent piece, down, off, whose birthday is it anyway, and what is it to, what is it time to throw away? This must be next, this must be the way back, yellowing glints, a tremendous fish, to whispers building in the little breezes between this and this darkness on your desk, on the open surface of your dock, one leaf landing dark on dark, imprinted this stock, come in, hey, thanks, it started, park your cart outside the park in the heart of the city, pierced by a startled barking, bringing you just so far through all that, to here, to now. Down, where the here and the now sit still, arc, huge irregular segments, parts, tested, a whir of wings, where fire works, welcome. And this one is Pop. As if empty the day, light, an apple on a window ledge, paint splash, As if empty the day, the place empty, an apple on a window ledge, its skin light, flecks of blood, as if emptiness itself made space glow, dendritic gold formations shimmerings in the dark rock matrix, stippling, hatching, spiraling, triple dot motifs along the length of the frequently changing combinations, startlingly complex, crushed glass fiber, bedded pebbles, impact flattened gold green beer cans, or radiates, or the carefully tousled hair of an artist's head in full career. God, you know the repertoire, the cool confidence of another up and coming young novelist on the radio, telling of his heart characters in the, they call it a plot, and it could be too, sweet street fantasy of realism, unputdownable as ever, all flowing along, swirl tracks of the featured bark of the tamarisk. Pop goes a bubble, or the very heart beating inside a body. One big, beautiful hero theatre, falling into that old rickety thing. There you're dead. Rain pools, dust pockets, bang and then bang and then bang. All together now, terms, conditions, circling. One brisk, what? Push, falling. Oh, money, 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 money. Circling and falling into that old rickety thing called time. Now, let me see. Pasts. I'm weaving together here Irish and Spanish pasts. Some of the imagery is from the village where I spent a good deal of time in Spain, and the scars of its civil war are still evident. Pasts. Flow of the pen tip, bounce and dip of the paper. Trim gardens, neat houses, somebody's dinner and spoon on a gatepost to their huerto. Not a weed in sight, peace of a kind, to turn no around on its head. In a red pot on a pillar under passing flashes. Butterflies, simple as that. Delicate brickwork, steeples, domes, columns, blooming and spreading in stone, to high curved ceilings cognate with heaven, if you can believe it. I was reaching for a glass to put in the dishwasher, fixing up the kitchen before anybody else was up and about, and my grip slipped, and trying to catch it, I brought my left hand down hard on a jagged shard on the countertop, cutting the ball of my thumb and the palm somehow of the right. Wake up, you idiot. Good morning, blood. Watching their flock vigilant in a violent world, overlords of ecclesia, torture of the mind and body, torture without end. The trouble with God is love. Your teeth dislodge, your eyes weaken, your waist thickens, your strength fades, your joints stiffen, your hair and gums recede, your past folds into others' pasts amend in time. Show me the Shannon number now. Silver splashes, red, black, wavering, dark blue flecks. The trouble with poetry is poetry. Now, I find it so strange reading to a screen. I'll never get used to it, I think. I'll just presume I'm audible. Okay, this is called pitch in lots of senses. Pitch. Open your pen and begin. Yes, take the cap off your biro and begin to, in mild spring sunlight after lengthy snow, to a coal tit feeding in the apple tree. Quick flicks of the head, pen tip to notepad, someone laughing and chatting in another garden in black and white. Oh. I wandered lonely in a crowd as a meaning-bearing creature, digging over vegetables, flashing signals to light-sensitive weed seeds in the dark. Tick. Between your fingers and your thumb, humble ambition. Getting the work done, doling, fixing, electing, splurging, purging curricula, controlling policy, public opinion, dissemination. The taste police, quick to be invisible, are out and about and busy over the generations, ready to shame us with a terrible pun. This is the tilting nib, less because the facts are, because dark blobs of rain, because pressure pulsing body of honeybee on passion flower, irreparable past, swallow gossip round eaves outside in the sunlight, because symbol and then a symbol and then none. Once upon a time you were a baby. Now what? Yeah. I've been writing and publishing poetry for gulp almost 50 years now, so this is in a way in the background of this one, where the piece says, well, isn't it enough? Maybe you've done enough. Pared is a P-A-R-E-D, pared down. A can on a table. It's labeled torn beside an apple with a bit gone just here, comma, red, green, brownish. Sugary curlicues, drop of coffee sliding over a cup's lip, gathering at its base, quiet. Ripple in the palm leaves, pod pendant from a spent flower. Burst of buddleia, snakes of bindweed, tickle of daisies, undersplash of cyclamen, froth of apple blossom. Clustered on purple, white, green wings and tight florets, crisp heaps in corners, leaves and shadows, all that. Stones settled down into fissures underground, then a feeling growing of having water is one of the wonderful things. Light mist on window, clear snail trail through it, weeds of instigations, ivy of twinkling, all chilly and alone and mistaking yet more mistakes for the one true take. That feeling, a new feeling growing, oh God, of having powers. Written quite enough at your age now, thank you. Splash go the colors as they hit surface. That force out of the blue, snowberry, dock, nettle and haw. Talking to you, listening to, or waiting to, or and, or I, if, then. Oh. Okay, well, I haven't despaired really. The washing machine in my home, a German machine, I note, sometimes speaks Irish, especially on the slow rinse setting. And what it seems to say to me is, "O will shed lach, O will shed lach," which in Irish means, is it legal? Is it legal? Or is he legal? So, pollen. My determination is bigger than your determination, sang the fly to the flower, busy, color and fragrance, sugar and shape, deceived. If that's the word. Look at that, a block of black scribbles on paper. Explain. When meaning dies, humanity takes leave. When you scratch your head, you feel better. You feel better. I had a message to send. You had a code to remember. Place, place under place. Replace the misplaced. Tap torn placemats beyond that map. Laugh. Listen for clues. Get to work.com. Busy. Are you a replacements officer? Trace that sense of place of yours to this pedestal base. Look up. What? A wilshed lach, a wilshed lach goes the washing machine in the next room. In the right place with the wrong face? Can't be. Remember everything. Do. Be careful. Walls have ears and here's there. Vermicular passageways of undersea vents, little wisps of mystery drifting along the tongue, cell-like bubbles, swallows hollowing out a path between territories to you and back, then replace the safety caps on the implacable and focus everything to a beautiful doodle so that you've got the whole caboodle on the grain tree right there under your nose. Bingo. Yes. There are several prose pieces, shortish prose poems, let's call them, in this book entitled Poetry. And this is, I'll read one of them. It opens with a little piece from Wordsworth's correspondence with William Godwin. Poetry. Acknowledging a gift of a copy of Beauty and the Beast, William Wordsworth wrote William Godwin on the 9th of March, 1811. To be brief, I had to pay for your tiny parcel 4 and 9pence. Excuse my frankness when I say I really grudge this sum. That last crossed out. Then the poet has a proposal for the philosopher. I deem you therefore my debtor, and will put you in a way of being quits with me. If you can command a copy of your book upon burial, which I have never seen, this is Godwin's essay on sepulchres, published 2 years earlier. Let it be sent to Lambs for my use, who in the course of this spring will be able to forward it to me free of expense. Which last word sparks a dash and a riff in parenthesis. On second thought, it too crossed out. I have 5 children and follow a work to me utterly unprofitable and which will ever continue so. Then remember me kindly to Mrs. Godwin and believe me with great truth yours. On Godwin's suggestion that Wordsworth versified Beauty and the Beast after the old chestnut, it's a great idea, but not my idea, which Wordsworth attributes to Gainsborough, and several generations have attributed it to others since, a sort of running literary convolvulus, the poet, in fact, thinks it is not at all a good idea. I confess there is to me something disgusting in the notion of a human being consenting to mate with a beast, however amiable his qualities of heart. The reaper is female and alone and singing in a language foreign to the listener. Frankenstein appears in 1818. When ecologists began looking closely at the acorn planting activities of certain birds, they found that the areas the birds chose to lay their stores by for the winter were almost always open country, not a Poetry Society recommendation. And so the forest moves, a shifting tissue of melting frames. At the symbolic intersection of art, all art, crashes and flashes, a busy place, 2 arrows point in opposite directions in a cold blue light, to the canon, to oblivion. Now, plant your acorn there. And I'll finish back with the dog. Pith. A dog came up the steps with a ball in his mouth and shook himself dry. Then he put the ball down carefully on the pier and began to nose it towards the edge, grabbing it back before it fell over into the water. Nobody on the pier seemed to notice it. Nobody seemed to be with it. The dog was absorbed in its game. The day was absorbed in itself. After several little runs like this, combined with quick retrievals, the dog, it was no accident, let the ball roll over and fall down again into the water. Then he jumped in after the ball with a great splash. Different rules, different game, different winners. There are laws and there are accidents, one more powerful than the other. And there may be general laws of accident prediction. What in this context does accident mean? So that each drop falling over the history of life laughs as it lands to break on water, dog, bowl, stone, interpretation. For whom then is the record made? Who dominate, who persuade, and for how long? And what is the truth out there? Where? How? An idea came up the steps with another idea in its mouth and shook itself dry. Now, okay, thank you very much. And thank you, David, for organizing this terrific event. Well. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maurice. That was great.
Right.
Yeah, many lines I could have picked out of that. I've seen some people have been putting them in the chat. I was particularly struck by Sweet Street Fantasy of Realism. What a great way of describing the kind of poetry we're all trying not to write, I suspect. I wonder if anybody has questions they want to ask of either Ray or Maurice. If you want to type something in the chat, I'll try quickly to read what's coming up there. And at the moment, it's just congratulations from everybody, I think. But yeah, just more congratulations from people.
Simon, just to say,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think we're all, the silence speaks volumes that we're all processing such powerful readings, really exceptional, strong, moving, lyrical, wonderful. And I don't know that any of us can really ask anything intelligent yet. I shall have to ask you tomorrow because or on Saturday, because it's just been such a powerful opening to the festival. Every reader today, thank you so much. It's been an outstanding start, really extraordinary.
Yeah, no, I can completely sympathize with that. Somebody, well, Vahni actually has posted a question for Maurice. Can you say more about animals, beasts in poetry and the boundaries between human and animal? Maurice, would you like to respond?
Okay. That's an interesting question, as every politician would say. Gosh, animals come through my work quite a bit, I suppose. I haven't thought out the particular significances of them. I've lived in different cultures where there are very different attitudes to animals, attitudes that would seem to our Western culture as extremely cruel and pitiless. And to witness that makes one think, I suppose. Good question, Vahni. By the way, your reading was fabulous, but I haven't got a set of clear pictures of my own attitudes to animals in my work. The dog is the playbook is, as I mentioned, was written in the run-up to the centenary of the 1916 revolution. There was a lot of, frankly, bullshit going on about that, as there will be in any country for to massage its national narrative. And I'm old enough to have been alive for the 50-year celebration, and I remember it, in which there was no mention of Common them on. This was the women's wing of the revolutionary movement at all. And they played a very significant role in that rather botched revolution. Anyway, that's away from animals. That's all I can say at the moment, I think.
Yeah, a very interesting question. I mean, I know Ray has thought quite a lot about the way in which we use animals to represent humans and the way we anthropomorphize animals and the contradictions that sort of throws up in relation to our actual entanglement in the biosphere. I wonder whether, Ray, do you want to say something about that? And then maybe I'll ask Vahni herself to say what she thinks about the question.
Yes, I only really started, I don't know, thinking might be too strong a word, but I only started actually paying attention to this relatively recently, and I think it's because they appeared in some of the poems. I have 4.5-year-old twin granddaughters whom I care for sometimes and have been for these last 4 years. And they love animals, real animals when they do see them, but mostly animals in books, and a lot of animals that are going extinct, in fact, but I don't tell them that. I don't tell them what extinction is. But, when I see the way that they identify with animals, the way that they love animals, whether it's a picture of an animal or a real animal, I just think, wow, they're gonna come to adulthood in a world that is, it's already so stripped of animal life, but it's, many of these animals will be completely gone probably by the time they reach their adulthood. And that just, I have to confront that every time I'm around them and they're showing me their new animal toy, So I think that's what it's been really, is just thinking, what's the world going to be like for these optimistic, loving little girls?
Yeah. Do you want to comment, Vahni, on what was prompting your question?
Well, what was prompting the question was really just the sort of observation of dogliness in Maurice's poem and how it was done in terms of natural detail and how naturally that flowed into political and philosophical reflection. It's something that the poet Vivek Narayanan and I have often discussed, which is dogliness and what place it might have in poetry. Addressed to one thing. But I mean, what you were saying, Ray, was also fascinating because it was making me think again of the heritage and ritual objects that Abigail was speaking about. I had the really unpleasant thought, one of the many unpleasant thoughts I frequently have, as you all know, that as animals were becoming extinct, they were becoming translated into soft toys. And the two thoughts I had were that when a culture is bombed, it turns up in an exhibition in the British Museum, that we're not going to give you an exhibition until we've bombed you. And then the thing is, we're going to flood the markets with soft toys when we've ruined your environment. And I started looking at these things almost as prognostications. Like, where's the next devastation? Look at the exhibition catalogues and the soft toys.
Yeah.
Really good point. I heard when they were, actually babies, they had a chew toy that was called Sophie Giraffe. And somehow it came to my attention that there are more Sophie Giraffe toys out in the world than there are really giraffes alive. Just not surprising, but it's horrifying.
Yeah, those are really good points. I mean, I wonder what, Abigail, if you're there, I wonder whether this prompts any thoughts for you, because obviously in Native American traditions, animals would have represented important sort of spirit entities, I suppose, and certainly work that I did in Africa, and Maurice has no doubt encountered this, and many people there are parts of sort of communities that are identified with particular animals. I wonder whether that kind of links in here for you, that sense of a lost past.
Yeah, it is certainly, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of literature on this idea of loss, and it is very interesting, it is very poignant. My second collection, I'm focusing a little bit more on narratives of violence, particularly against women. It started out as violence against the landscape and women and indigenous people in general, and the threads of all of that, and there's some of that, but the focus is sort of narrating on indigenous women. But in writing that project and looking at how our narratives allow for such violence, right? How our fairy tales, what we sort of groom young girls to expect with their lives based on the stories we tell, what we sort of prepare to think as normal based on how these news events are communicated. And so looking at how narratives sort of facilitate this violence and ongoing violence, and how violence against women and the landscape is related in the same ways that we exotify indigenous women, and it becomes something to be
conquered in the same way that the land is something to be conquered, especially in sort of a Western theology where there's this idea of dominion. Mm-hmm. And in doing that project, I really had to stop and pull back and focus a little bit more on what's still here, how to kind of come out the other side of that. Because I've always felt like the downer at poetry readings as far as my material, and like, I'm sorry everyone's having such a good night, let me read you all these depressing poems. And there's a certain inescaping of that if we're conscious and we're aware and we're trying to participate on these sort of big picture issues, right? It becomes irresponsible to be silent, but how to also be able to see a way forward through that. And so I suppose even with the notions of animals and the Anthropocene and you know, these next extinction events and everything that's going on, trying to look too for patterns of survival, maybe ways in which that looks differently, and ways of kind of recognizing that worlds have ended before, and so looking at what comes out the other side of that, and important to look behind us and to keep track of what we're losing, but also to remember to look forward and to also remember to carry those narratives forward as well. I'm really grounded by what Vahni said about just the pattern of the British Museum and the idea of when do you pay tribute to somebody, when do you sort of preserve, and what that suggests about animals and the kind of stuffed animals. So that'll give me a lot to think about, I think, going forward. But
yeah, very powerful stuff. Yeah, it's kind of triggering various thoughts in my mind. We've had a sign posted, stuck up on the road out here by the local council recently, which has got some information about fish in the local river. Mm-hmm. It's like the fish have been there for hundreds of years, but they've now become a kind of, well, it's almost like turning the city into a sort of theme park. I kind of understand the motivation to try and get people to understand what's actually there and look at it, but at the same time, it sort of feels like it's just turning the neighborhood into a kind of spectacle in a weirdly kind of alienating sort of way. That's kind of how I experience it. A kind of trivial example maybe, but it's kind of part of a broader fabric. Anyway, there aren't any more questions in the chat, and I don't want to kind of prolong this unnecessarily. I think it's been really powerful readings, very interesting. There's a discussion there. I think there's plenty to be down about what's going on in the world, so I don't think you need to apologize about that, Abigail. But I really liked your phrase about, looking for patterns of survival. I think that's what we're all kind of groping around for, and trying hopefully to sort of co-create amongst us some ways of moving forward on that. And perhaps we can explore some of that, those of us who are going to be in Stowpain for the festival over the weekend, what that might look like. That's certainly some of what I'm going to be talking about when I speak about Ray's poetry on Saturday morning. So thank you, everybody. A really fantastic evening.
Thank you.
David, do you want to say anything by way of wrapping up?
Just to echo, thanks for everyone. So many memorable lines, poems and pieces. Yeah, I enjoyed the wordplay and word arrangements, and I think it's an excellent start to the festival, generating a number of themes which I think will be echoed and explored in the next few days at Stowpain. So looking forward to it, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.